It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the South Bay Lakers assistant coach, Brian Walsh. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brandon. Thanks for having me. I feel privileged to be on your show.
Thank you. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to work in professional sports as a coach?
Well, I don't know if I really ever made that decision. I think I had some very lucky breaks early on when I was a high school coach. We had some very good players, and sometimes when you get good players, it gives you opportunities elsewhere to move up, and that's kind of how it happened for me in a nutshell. But I just think I was around some good people, and I had some really lucky breaks.
What was it like to become the assistant coach for the South Bay Lakers?
Well, the South Bay Lakers are such a classy organization. I think the way that I like to look at it is, other than the NBA, it's the next best job, right below the NBA. So to me, I was very proud to become a coach for South Bay, and to be in Los Angeles. We're really lucky because we're around all of the Lakers players and coaches, as well as the South Bay players, and so we're all in the same building. So we get to see a lot that goes on with the Laker organization. So it's really great to be in that building with all those people.
What is it like whenever players like LeBron James and Anthony Davis come down for rehab?
Well, LeBron James or Anthony Davis had never come to our team, but as I say, we see them around the facility all the time. And our coaching staff is also very lucky to be included in Lakers, um, typically the preseason and summer league. So when we're around those guys, I think we try to keep quiet and learn as much as we can from those great players, and just try to make sure that we stay in our lane and do what we're supposed to.
What is your time like working with the international level?
Well, the international level is so much different. It's a completely different style of basketball. So right now, I think the international world looks at basketball as it's played in the NBA. And I think they're a little reluctant of the way American coaches would bring an NBA style over there. So international basketball is just very different. It's much more technical, and it's much more patterned, almost like college, if you want to equate it. They play much more of a pass, multiple pass, um, um, and grind you down kind of offensive style defense as well.
What was it like to coach in different countries like China and Vietnam?
Well, those countries, they believe that when an American coach comes over, that you're immediately going to make their team great. So you have to you have to turn them around in about 5 minutes. And if you're not able to do so, you may be on your way back home. But it's a lot of pressure to go overseas and coach, because they want results right now. The language barrier is very different, and sometimes the translators are very difficult to communicate with. You would think it would be easy, but it's very difficult to get the communication down. But once you do, it's a lot of fun, and to learn different cultures is something that it's really important for me.
What is it the biggest difference between coaching in the international versus the NBA G League?
Well, the NBA G League is about developing the young players, and making sure that they can get up to the NBA and be functional. And overseas, it's about winning games first and foremost. So in the G League, the NBA teams want you to grow their young players, and winning is important, but it's not as important as growing those valuable players that they get in the draft or they get at other places. So you have to make those players learn the game in the way the NBA team wants you to. And then you also have to be able to try to win games as well. Whereas comparing it to overseas, as I said, if you don't win, you're on a flight home pretty quick.
What was your time like with the New Mexico State International Basketball League?
Well, that the New Mexico Slam, yeah, that was my first professional league, and that was in the international league, and then it quickly changed to the CBA, and that was when I was a young coach, and I was really in awe with all the different players and how good the players were. If you can imagine going right from high school to that level, I was in awe of what the players could do. So that was probably my biggest learning experience then, learning how to communicate with professional players.
What was your time like working with the Colorado 14ers?
Well, that was back in a time in my life, a very challenging time, but I worked with some great people. Joe Wolf was the head coach there, and he was a great friend of mine. He helped me through a lot of tough times. And that was a time when the Colorado team that no longer exists in the G League was the Denver Nuggets team. And it was a great experience because it was close to my home state of New Mexico. So it was a unique time, but it was also a learning experience and kicked off a long run for me in the G League.
What was your time like working, of course, with the Rio Valley Vipers?
Oh, well, that was a fun time being down close to the Mexican border and learning a different culture. My wife is from Mexico, so she loved it down there and on the border in McAllen, Texas. And the fans down there were one of the best fan bases I've ever had in the G League. And they really, really loved bringing the G League to their town.
Can you talk about, of course, how has being the head coach helped you to now be the assistant coach for the South Bay Lakers?
Well, being a head coach and then becoming an assistant, that you kind of know more clearly what your head coach needs from you, because you realize being a head coach, you have to make sure that there's a boundary set. And as an assistant, you really want to help your head coach establish those boundaries and make sure that his system he puts on the floor, and it's not a system created in a different realm from some other person. You want to help him put his name on that team.
Of course, what was your experience as the first head coach in your career?
Well, let's see, my very first, well, that was when I became the head coach of the New Mexico team in the CBA. And I kind of had no idea what I was doing. And I was kind of doing the best job that I could. I was thrown in the fire. And then with really no assistant coaches, we had such a small budget. One of my friends who became a really great coach, Casey Owens, became my assistant. And we did very well, but it was a time of learning for me. And it was a time that if I hadn't been thrown in the fire, I don't know if I'd be as good of a coach as I am today.
What was the transition to go from being a head coach to assistant coach in the G League for the South Bay Lakers?
Well, the South Bay Lakers is part of a huge organization, as we've talked about earlier. And you have to understand and find your role and stay in your role. There's so many great people in that organization that you want to make sure that you respect everybody's job and you don't cross into their job. And if you do so, You make sure that you stay in your own lane as much as possible. My becoming a South Bay assistant, as I said before, was humbling and very rewarding.
What have you accomplished so far as the assistant coach for the South Bay Lakers?
Well, we've had some great accomplishments in the last 6 years. We had we were the all-star coaches one season. We made it to the finals and almost we made it to the final game of the finals in my very first year there. We had the best record in history for a first half of a season. We've had a lot of great milestones in my time there, but one that we haven't had is we haven't won a championship. So hopefully that's coming in the near future.
What is a typical game day like for the South Bay Lakers?
A typical game day, that's a really good question. Well, typically our game plan is already set before game day. What we do is we come in at either 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. to do a quick hour shoot around with the players to give them their final preparation for the game. We're out of the gym pretty quickly around noon. Typically, everybody goes back to their hotel or their home, and they rest up, and they're back in the gym by 5:30. Um, um, and then we're getting ready for our game. So the 2 hours prior to game time is our hardest working time for assistants. We're getting all the players warmed up in their own specific way, ready for their game. And then at 7 o'clock, it's tip-off time.
What is it like to play in the Staples Center where, of course, LeBron James and Anthony Davis play?
Well, in the G League earlier in a few years back, the G League played in the Staples Center, but now the G League team plays in the Lakers facility in El Segundo. And it's called the UCLA, what is it? UCLA something, something, something center. And it's a beautiful facility with everything that an athlete and a coach needs to be great. The Lakers give that to both of their teams. They do everything they can to give us every advantage that we can possibly have. And hopefully you get out to California, Brandon, you can see a game in the Lakers facility.
I would love that. Who are some of the teams that you play in the G League?
Well, in our conference closest to us, we play the Clippers team, the Agua Caliente Clippers. We play the Santa Cruz Warriors, who's the Golden State Warriors team. Those are probably our closest rivals. We also play the Miami Heat's team is close in our conference. They play in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We play teams all over the country from the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, the Austin Spurs, all the way to the Maine Red Claws, all the way on the other side of the country. Also the Westchester Knicks. We get to really great travel as well.
What is it like whenever your players get that call up to become a Laker?
That's another great question. That's when everything kind of comes together and you feel like you really did your best job. Even winning games is not as rewarding as when your players get to a point where an NBA team feels that they're ready and they call them up either for a 10-day or sign them to a contract outright. That's the most rewarding feeling a G League coach can have.
As you talked about the 10-day contract, can you talk a little bit more about what a 10-day contract is?
Sure. A 10-day contract, as it says, it's 10 days long, and the player gets that period of time to either show that team that they are good enough to either stay with the team, or the NBA team can decide after 10 days if they want to give them a second 10-day. If the player earns the second 10-day call up, then at the end of that 10 days, then the NBA team would have to decide if they want to sign that player for the rest of the season or send them back to their G League team. So once a player gets a 10-day call up, that's the moment of truth for that G League player. And that's his final, or that's his really, Broadway play to give it a shot and make the NBA.
Can you talk about, of course, the challenges that you face as a coach whenever you do have those players that get that call up and you have to like maybe rebuild your whole team?
Right. So the G League coaches and learning how to coach in the G League is extremely unique. Um, Most coaches are either focused towards college or the NBA, and the G League is a small kind of fraternity of coaches that understands that you have to build 2 or 3 teams during your season. Every season, you have to be prepared to build your team multiple times over. That's for different reasons. Maybe a player is going to give it a short period of time, and then maybe he'll leave to go overseas. Um, but in the G League, you're never set with your roster. Like in most every other sport, once you get your roster set, then it's time to go try to win a championship. In the G League, you're always looking for players because you know that you're going to have some roster moves coming up at any moment. So that's the unique part of being a G League coach, is understanding that you're building your team constantly. It never stops.
What is something that you learn now that you didn't know before becoming the coach in the G League?
Well, really, it's to listen to all the great people around. Before when you're a young coach, you coach way too much, you talk way too much, and you don't listen near enough. Listening is the best thing that can grow your coaching ability. I'm good. If I was to give a young coach advice, it's to try to calm down, coach less, and you'll learn much more. And then when you do coach, then it's worth much more. And your advice will be much more high powered than just a lot of little talk that means nothing. Listen, learn, and then you'll be a much better coach.
That follows up to my question about the advice. What advice would you give somebody looking to work in professional sports on the coach level?
Well, be great at something that NBA staffs need. Be great at film breakdown. Learn the film systems that the NBA teams use and become an expert at that. Understand that you have work that these people that you're going to be competing with don't ask for vacation time or time off. They don't ask for extra gear. They don't ask for extra things. They're just there to work. So you have to be the hardest worker in the room. And if you're not, you come back the next day and try to be the best worker in the room that day. But keep your mouth shut, learn, and be a positive person.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media?
Well, Brandon, I tried to kind of cut my social media down a little bit. I only am on LinkedIn right now. And that was just because of so much hyperbolic stuff on social media. I kind of wanted to just stay out of that for a little while. So I got off of Twitter, but pretty soon, possibly I'll be on Twitter. If you wanted to connect with me, LinkedIn's the best and the safest place to do it.
Thank you again for your interview and best of luck with your coaching experience with the South Bay Lakers.
Brandon, thank you for giving me this privilege to be on your show. And again, I hope you come out to LA and so we can invite you to a game.
Sounds good. Thank you again, Brian Walsh, for your interview and best of luck.
Thank you, Brandon. You're a good man. Appreciate the time. Bye-bye.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Brian Welch, for your interview and best of luck.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.